different decades of wines here. For those of you who aren't familiar with drinking wine with this sort of age, I think this will be an interesting experience. One of the oft talked about aspects of the Stag's Leap District is the ageability of its wine, for reasons we'll get into later with the winemakers. But they're here for you. We're going to try them left to right. I thought we would all taste together, spend a few minutes on each wine, and then afterwards we'll open up questions both for myself and then, as you now know, there's a representative from every winery here. Probably only have time for a couple questions, but we'll move quickly through the wines. So starting with the Stag's Leap Wine Cellars Cask 23, 1977. So Cask 23, probably one of the most iconic wines, not just in Stag's Leap District, but the entire Napa Valley. This is a mature wine, surely. It has a lot of what we call secondary and tertiary flavors. What that means are non-fruit flavors, flavors like forest floor and mushroom and sort of library, earthy smells. You're starting to get that, but there is still fruit here. I think you'll see a nice kind of pop of a red apple skin, a little hint of cherry. Very, very pretty wine, certainly of an age ready to be consumed, but by no means over the hill. That's one. Wine number two is the 1980 Steltzner Vineyard. So Stelzner is now the site of Odette. So keep that in your mind when tasting this wine, and then the final wine. They're more or less from the same patch of earth, or at least proximity, right? Dick? Yes, okay. And this is a little bit more, one of the more powerful wines. For the older wines here, 1980 was a very warm year, pretty warm year. So the fruit's a little bit riper, a little bit darker, and the tannic grip is a little bit more noticeable. Try to keep in your mind, obviously these are all very different wines from different parts of the Stag's Leap District, made by different people and from different decades. But just use your imagination, sort of open up, try to uncover, if you can, any similarities between the wines. So we're trying to establish, what is the continuity? What does it taste like? What does it feel like in these wines? So that's the Stelzner. Moving on to the 1988 Shafer Vineyards Hillside Select. So this is probably the lightest wine of the lineup. It's a little bit more delicate. That's not necessarily a well-known hallmark of Hillside Select. It's more to do with the vintage. The wines are a little bit more lacy. They're a little bit more evolved from this vintage in general, but I think this is a very good representation of that vintage and of the Hillside Select. Also, by no means over the hill, it's a different expression of Cabernet. So a little bit more light on its feet, but still has a little bit of that pretty incense that some of these are getting. Again, a little bit of that red apple skin. And the finish, a dustiness to the tannin, which is what, when people talk about the signature of Stag's Leap District, they're generally talking about the tannic signature. So for those of you that don't know what tannins are, if you ever drink an overly steeped tea, that sort of tacky sensation in your mouth, that's sort of what we're looking for with an older wine. That is usually resolved to the point of just a kind of a dusty cocoa powder feeling is what I get out of these older wines. You may not agree necessarily. And then the 99 Pine Ridge. So 99, late 90s, hard to imagine this was 15 years ago. So the wine, is of an age, but I think is still drinking like a fairly fresh-faced modern wine. Definitely a little bit more fruit and intensity in the palate. It hasn't yet kind of crossed over into all of those earthy, ethereal flavors. This still has a lot of fruit presence to it. But again, I think that if you pay attention in the finish, you'll note that, again, the sort of dusty, chalky cocoa powder type tannin. Then with the 2002 Chimney Rock wine, we are thoroughly in the modern era. 2002 was one of the riper vintages that Napa Valley's had in modern times, and I think that it shows in the wine. There's a lot of concentration here, a lot of impact. This is, I think now, when people think about Napa Valley and think about Stag's Leap, this is more of what you're used to. This more feels more normal. This is more of an age where people are used to drinking. But a beautiful wine, a big wine, yet it is balanced. It has a lot of fruit, but it also has a lot of excellent structure, which is ideally what all good wines should have, a balance of both. And then the 2012 Odette, which is the very last wine, again, kind of going back to the formerly Stelzner plot. This is a young wine. This is bombastic. This is very primary, more fruit flavors than anything else. You can smell, I think, still the oak barrel on this wine. And that will resolve with time. I think you could probably notice as the wines, if you go backwards the other way and taste, that oak smell becomes like a cedar around 99, which becomes like a sandalwood when you get to 80 and 77. So all of the elements of a wine evolve, the oak element, the fruit, the texture. But this is, young Stag's Leap, joyful, big, bright, cheery fruit. Anyway, very delicious wines.